and she turns to camera. She walks towards camera. The other nurses in the background, as Elwood delivers this line about it would be nice to have a bath to Harvey, they're both looking in the wrong direction. So none of them really get to grasp with what Elwood is saying about having a bath to Harvey. They both kind of think the reference is to them.
Goodbye, my dear. You could have had a bath, too.
I've already had a bath.
Oh, Miss Kelly, I wasn't speaking to you. I was speaking to my friend.
Mr. Dowd, I take a bath every morning just before I go on duty.
All right, well, thank you, Ken. Today we're going to be reviewing the movie Harvey.
And thank you very much for reacquainting me with this film. It is decades since I last saw this film, so it was an absolute pleasure to come back and rewatch it a couple of times. I think I'd put it up there as one of Jimmy Stewart's best films. It's just so, so beautiful. As a film, it's incredibly slow in terms of the camera work. It's the dialogue. It's the dialogue, which is actually very fast paced. There's a lot of information in the dialogue, and there's a lot of, obviously it's a comedy. It's a verbal comedy, and occasionally it's bit of a slapstick comedy. I'm going to sit with kind of my visuals on how I re-saw this film after having not watched it for many years. Is that the camera works very slow, but the actors fill the space. The actors move in set to get themselves into the perfect position to deliver dialogue. There's none of this modern fast-paced editing you get in films today. The camera dollies between one scene and the next scene, and actors just move and they deliver their lines, and it's just visually really nice, beautifully lit. It's black and white. That's unless you're going to be watching the colorized version, if there is one. Beautiful in black and white, really nice. A very convoluted plot for what technically should be a very simple film. So I suppose the easiest way of saying this is it's a slight case of mistaken identity or confused identity, or mixed messages, the wrong messages. People, the main protagonists in this film, not quite getting a message when they should have got a message. I'm going to throw that at you, and I'm going to allow you. I'm copying out with this one. I'm going to allow you to briefly, if you can, to give the viewers an idea as to what the plot is. I'm being a chicken. I really am being a chicken. It's
I'm going to do my best.
It's such a difficult thing, I think, to condense down.
So it starts out, we meet Elwood Dowd. He's actually leaving his beautiful estate, and he's actually going out on the town, and you see him talking to someone, but you don't see who that person is.
After you.
And you see his sister and his niece looking out the window, and they're like, oh, good, he's leaving, because they're going to throw a party. And the reason they're throwing a party with him gone is that they don't want him here. And the reason they don't want him here is that Elwood has a friend, and his friend is named Harvey. The problem with his friend is that no one can see his friend, except sometimes his sister. His friend is a puka. His friend is a rabbit that is 6 feet 3 inches tall. In fact, actually, James Stewart was actually 6'3", and the play has Harvey being 6'3", but James Stewart wanted them to change it to say that he was 6'8", because he always is looking up at Harvey. So he's always talking to his friend, introducing people to his friend, and people are like, they're put off by that. They don't really understand, like, okay, he's crazy. They don't want anything to do with it. So that's why they want to get Elwood out of the house, so they can give out this party, which the niece's name, Myrtle May, she's ready to kind of meet men and kind of come out in society, and the mother's trying to have that happen. And so, any case, Elwood goes on, he goes to the bar. I watched this first time as a kid, and I didn't really pick up on all the drinking. He goes to the bar a lot. He's always drinking.
Is this all right? You sure? Well, I'll give you a hand. Whoop it, don't slip. No, you sure this is all right? You wouldn't rather sit in a booth? Well, all right.
Would he prefer a booth, Mr. Dowd?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Cracker. He seems to prefer the bar today.
And so he goes to the bar.
He's never drunk.
Never drunk. Always at the
Yeah.
bar ordering drinks for himself, ordering drinks for Harvey, and people like the bartender's fine with it, but other people in the bar are like, what's going on? And they're kind of like put out by it. Or I think one guy says, hey, the guy at the end of the bar can buy my drink. And Elwood says, yeah, Harvey would be happy to do that. So
Yeah.
the thing about it is that Elwood then goes on to talk to an old friend that is at the bar, and the friend's like, hey, you know, your sister's giving a party. I always read the society pages. So he ends up going back home to that party. The same time, the sister, being kind of concerned that Elwood would come back, she calls her friend the judge.
Veta, my girl, this is a pleasure.
Judge, we haven't got a moment to lose. I'm having the Wednesday forum over for a program tea and reception for Ethel Chauvenet. Elwood has just gone out, but I'm so afraid he may come back. You can understand why.
The judge has somebody, he tries to have somebody go and follow Elwood and keep him from going home. That doesn't happen because the guy that he has to go out and follow Elwood and prevent him from going home immediately slips, falls, and ends up falling right in front of a doctor's office. So that doesn't happen, right? So in comes Elwood. He starts introducing his friend Harvey to all the guests, and Myrtle May and the sister is named Veta Louise. They're horrified, and all the guests are starting to leave and find their excuses of why they're going to leave.
And now, Aunt Ethel, I'd like you to meet Harvey. Harvey, you've heard me speak of Aunt Ethel Chauvenet. She's one of my oldest and dearest friends. She's the one who... that's right. Well, this is the one. No, she's the one.
And so Veta Louise, the sister, decides to do what she should have done long ago. And she calls her friend the judge, and she says, we need to do what we talked about for so long. And so basically the idea is to commit Elwood and bring him to this sanitarium named Chumley's like rest home sanitarium. And so that's what they do. So she brings her brother and she tells him to wait in the taxi, and she goes in and she's talking to the nurse, Miss Kelly, telling her all about her brother. And Miss Kelly's like, well, where's your brother? She says, he's out in the cab.
You have him with you now?
Oh, yes. He's outside waiting in a taxi cab. I told him to wait. He always does what I tell him.
I see. Is he married?
No.
She presses a button. Wilson, go and get Mr. Elwood. He's outside in the cab. Go and ask him to come in. Wilson comes down. He's this gruff guy, like New Yorker guy and all that. He's like, ask him. She's like, yes, this is his sister. Oh, yes, I will ask him. You see him grabbing Elwood and shoving him into the elevator and all that.
Isn't this wonderful, Veta?
Okay, buddy.
Next, his sister goes on to talk with Dr. Sanderson. And as she's talking to him, telling him all the problems with her brother, she kind of slips that sometimes she sees this 6-foot rabbit too. And he realizes, or he thinks, that it's actually the sister that's crazy and that she's saying that the brother's crazy.
Just who is he? Is someone your brother picked up in one of these bars?
Doctor, I've been telling you Harvey is a rabbit. A big white rabbit, 6 feet high, or is it 6 feet 3.5? Heaven knows I ought to know. He's been around the house long enough.
So he decides that the sister should be committed and the brother should be released. In fact, they're all worried that they're going to get sued because they sent the brother up, and you know, who knows what they're doing with the brother. So that's like this whole mistaken thing that they think it's actually the sister that's crazy, it's the brother that's crazy, and all that kind of stuff that's going on. They release Elwood, they commit Veta Louise, and later they realize they made a mistake. And they realize it because before the brother Elwood leaves, he is outside and he's picking flowers, and he talks to the wife of the guy that runs the place. The guy that runs the place is Dr. Chumley, and he's telling her about his friend Harvey, who's a puka, and he's picking these flowers for Harvey. The wife goes in, tells Dr. Chumley about the guy Elwood that's looking for the rabbit, and they realize, ooh, they made a mistake. They released Elwood, they committed Veta Louise, and they made a mistake. So now is a chase around town to find Elwood, release Veta Louise, and try to prevent being sued. So that is not the whole thing.
That was absolutely That was a beautiful synopsis of that. Absolutely. Obviously, a couple of things which come to mind is that obviously Elwood is always looking up at the rabbit. So it's interesting. I didn't actually realize Jimmy Stewart was that tall. But yes, if this rabbit is 6'3", Elwood's always looking up. So this rabbit must be like 7 foot, which would be like 2 meters 20 or whatever that would be in metric. I mean, one of the things which obviously strikes me of a lot of films of this era, of this kind of quality, is the mid-Atlantic accent that pretty much everybody has. I think Wilson probably could be the only one who doesn't. I mean, for me, he's kind of, his accent is that mid-New York kind of accent. Yeah, Wilson's a bit of a, he's a bit of a live wire. He definitely uses his physical presence to coerce people into things. So again, this slapstick humor where Wilson grabs Elwood and throws him in the lift. It's just a brief shot where he just grabs him and drags him into the lift. Or when he picks up Veta Louise,
he just picks her up and he picks her up in this big hair.
He just physically picks her up.
He's picking flowers.
Just kind of on his shoulder.
I just want to point out a really good quote that she's picking flowers and he said,
Well, wouldn't you like to come inside and pick some off the wallpaper?
Well, no, thank you. These will do nicely. Good day.
It is just littered with these little verbal funnies all the way through. And obviously, as I mentioned earlier, just slapstick humor as well. So it's a real mix of verbal humor and slapstick humor. And I think you really have to listen to the dialogue to be able to follow this film, because it's just this beautiful mix. It's just a beautiful mix. I mean, yeah, you go from slapstick to all these little one-liners, these really beautifully crafted one-liners thrown in. Now, this was originally a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's a stage show, and in some respects, it kind of has a feel of a stage production. I mean, that's partly down to the camera work of the era, which is very slow, but it kind of does have this feeling of a theatre production. I mean, one of the things I like is the fact that when Elwood is interacting with Harvey, that other actors are always looking the other way when he's interacting or when he says something. There are several scenes, I could pluck many, but there's a lovely bit where Elwood is waiting to have a bath or to be given a bath. He's such an amenable person. He's just like, he's as passive and gentle and amenable as you can get. And he doesn't quite grasp the fact that he's going to be committed. He's oblivious to this. But anyway, he is sitting there waiting to have a bath, and Nurse Kelly comes up because she thinks that he's the wrong person and he's not going to be committed, and comes in and he says, I'm waiting here. I've been offered a bath by a lovely nurse who was in before. And she kind of says, no, you're going to come with me. And he tries to appease both nurses by saying, well, I can have a bath and then we can then go and do what you want to do. And she says, no, come downstairs. And she turns to camera. She walks towards camera. The other nurses in the background, as Elwood delivers this line about it would be nice to have a bath to Harvey, they're both looking in the wrong direction. So none of them really get to grasp with what Elwood is saying about having a bath to Harvey. They both kind of think the reference is to them.
Goodbye, my dear. You could have had a bath, too.
I've already had a bath.
Oh, Miss Kelly, I wasn't speaking to you. I was speaking to my friend.
Mr. Dowd, I take a bath every morning just before I go on duty.
And there's lots of these situations where Elwood's saying something, and I think it tends to work more with Dr. Sanders and Miss Kelly, where they're just looking in the opposite direction and just do not see what Elwood is saying to Harvey, or don't relate it to Harvey. They relate it to themselves, or the line's really quickly cut by them delivering another line. So it just chops this all about. But yeah, some great visual comic timing throughout.
And there's during the scene where Dr. Sanderson and Nurse Kelly are interacting with them, he's pulling out a chair for Harvey to sit down, but they're looking the other way, so they don't see that.
Yeah.
He keeps on trying to say he wants to introduce, but then they come up with their next line or their next question So they miss the fact that he always wants to introduce everybody to Harvey, but they're just quick to, oh, we made a mistake and all this. So they're too quick to come and respond to him, that they don't give him a chance to introduce Harvey. So they never realize that he is actually the one that has the imaginary friend, Harvey.
Yeah. But all of this is all visual. I mean, these are all quite often wide shots where the camera's moving in and finding things. And every time they do this, the split second acting in terms of looking off to the opposite direction, to being distracted by something else, is what's happening on this pretty wide shot. So immaculate timing by all of the actors, one being in the correct place, and two, always just looking off at the precise moment when they needed to. So yeah, and it's a lovely scene where Elwood is sat there and there's the empty chair. As you say, there's this lovely scene where Elwood is sitting with Harvey in the next chair. And as a composition, you would never leave an empty chair, but obviously there is an invisible protagonist there, Harvey, who obviously we can't see. So the framing is perfect because Harvey should be there. We should be able to see Harvey. But obviously at this particular moment, we as an audience just perceive that Harvey is some invisible friend, is just, is an imaginary friend of Elwood. But yeah, I mean, the way they deliver and build the plot, and build the suspense, and build this the way they build this misidentity of the way they build the mistaken identity plot is beautiful. I mean, Veta she's her own worst enemy. She's a little chatterbox, but her line of conversation is so erratic. You kind of think she's a bit barking mad, because her chat she kind of assumes that everybody knows the backstory, and nobody does, and she just jabbers away. So you do kind of think, yeah, she's a little bit mad. And obviously, admitting to the fact that occasionally she sees Harvey, you can absolutely see how this mistaken identity situation happens, and how the mistaken identity plot just spirals into a mess where she is taken into the sanatorium. He's let go, and yes, the whole plot about eventually getting out. I don't know. I mean, I think you perfectly built the plot there, because it is, once you lose the plot line in terms of one person, it's very difficult to kind of bring yourself back, because it is just so intricate in terms of how all of these characters interact, and how the story between one and the other, if you get one thing wrong, or instantly just changes the whole plot line. I just have to thank you for getting that plot down so concisely, because it is so complicated, and it's so complicated because of the verbal dialogue, which just absolutely is just a joy to listen to. And for those who are learning English, I think it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge, despite the fact that it's mid-Atlantic English. It's very fast-paced. You've really got to keep on top of these one-liners. You've really got to keep on top of what's happening between all of our major protagonists here. An absolute joy to watch.
I think
so. Anyway, continue with the rest of the plot, and let's see.
So the rest of the plot, when they realize they made a mistake, Dr. Chumley is the head honcho there, and he's like, "Oh," he said, we need to go and find Elwood." He calls Wilson. They're going to go out and find him, and he tells Dr. Sanderson, "When I get back, you're fired."
So you gave him a pass, Dr. Sanderson. Perhaps they neglected to tell you at medical school that a rabbit has large, pointed ears. Do you know what you've done? You've allowed a psychopathic case to walk out of here and roam around with an overgrown white rabbit. You've laid me open to a lawsuit.
So he goes out looking for Elwood. They go to the house. They're looking for Elwood. Now, what happens when they go to the house? Wilson comes in. He ends up meeting the niece that was going to have this coming out party to meet a man. And they end up actually kind of, in a way, forming an attraction. So in a way, the whole thing that Elwood coming back to the party and being brought to the sanitarium kind of worked out for, so it works out for Myrtle May because she ends up meeting Wilson. So, there's like, it kind of was like, was it meant to be? Was it meant to be that Elwood went home and was put in the sanitarium?
I don't think Myrtle May meets Wilson. I think Wilson inflicts himself upon her. I mean, there's that lovely scene, obviously, when they've just met. So, as you say, Wilson comes in. He's looking for Elwood. He meets Myrtle May, and he pins Myrtle May up against one of the walls, and he's like right up against her, and he's kind of talking to her, and he's attracted to her. I think she's just scared witless, to be perfectly honest.
She is, and he's like, "Are you one of the crazies too?" And then it ends up being that she says, "Hey, I want you to lock up my uncle just as much as you do." And then he's like, I gotta go. And she's like, "Hey, wouldn't you like to have a sandwich?"
You look awfully hungry, Mr. Wilson. How about a sandwich?
Yeah, but I don't want that crazy dame on my neck.
Oh, don't worry about Mother. She won't come down right away. She's too frightened. Would you like a ham and rye?
How about an egg and onion?
I'd love to make you an egg and onion.
There's a lovely bit where they walk off to the kitchen, and there's a slapper up. Oh, he's obviously done something.
He does something, exactly.
The only thing, you can only do that in a film which is 70 odd years of age. I don't think you could use that kind of line in a modern film, but it is, I do think that Myrtle is basically, she's accosted by Wilson. She's accosted by this person who is just in her face. I think, this whole party to introduce her to men, I think she just doesn't know what men are. She's just like devoid of any understanding as to men, in a very slapstick, in a very humorous kind of way. So when Wilson sort of inflicts himself, I'm going to use that word, inflicts himself upon her, she's just so overawed by the fact that a man is interested in her that she just goes along with it, because it's just like, oh my God, there's a man interested in me. And she just runs with it. She plays a lovely part, actually. There's a couple of occasions where she's a very attractive lady, but she plays this real frumper. She's sort of pulling her jumper down. She's leaning down, listening to a conversation, and she plays the part really, really well. I like Wilson as well. He's a New Yorker. He's a bit of a heavy. He's not very subtle. There's a lovely scene when they all, as you say, they go hunting for Elwood, and they all end up in a bar. Elwood is sat in a booth. Again, another one of these lovely scenes where it's just a wide shot where all the actors are perfectly placed. There's only a few cuts which get you around that scene. But Wilson just wants to use physical violence to resolve the situation. This scene actually is a little bit like It's a Wonderful Life, the bar scene from It's a Wonderful Life.
It is. I think that when there was like a bit of a fight happening, it was like, I feel like that was the classic bar fight kind of thing, and the exact kind of scene from It's a Wonderful Life. Because
obviously the barman knows Elwood, and obviously he knows he's a bit barking mad. I'll explain that one, because in the UK we say barking, which is as a reference to somebody who's mad. So, but he's such a brilliant customer. He's always there drinking, that he defends Elwood, and he asks there's this situation where he says, "Is everything all right?" And Elwood defends Wilson and says, "Yes, he's a youthful inexperience," or something to that extent. But yeah, that scene is kind of like, it's not a carbon copy of It's a Wonderful Life, but you kind of see the resemblance between the two bar scenes in the two films. I don't know whether that was intentional, but I watched it and thought, yeah, this is just, it's sort of out of A Wonderful Life. But again, coming back to this bar scene, this 3 or 4 way chat in the booth, beautifully lit. The camera is static for a while, where Kelly is right on the edge of frame. You've got Dr. Sanders, you've got Wilson, and then you've got Elwood, and they're having this chat. And it only cuts on a couple of occasions. And I don't know how long that is. It must be 40, 50 seconds. In a modern film, that would be cut to Elwood, cut to Dr. Sanders, cut to Kelly, cut to Mr. Wilson, back to Elwood. You'd be like, cuts every couple of seconds. It's 6. It just invites you to watch a beautiful shot and this soft, gentle dialogue, which is explaining a lot of things happening in front of you. There's another one where eventually they go out into the back alley behind the bar, behind the pub. And there's a bit where Elwood is saying, you know, he's explaining that he's never danced in a long time. And there's probably a shot which must be 15, 20 seconds long, static shot. And then everything else after that is, again, they're long shots where he's explaining how after a night of drinking with a friend, he meets Harvey, who's propping up a lamppost somewhere, and how this whole relationship with Harvey started, and how Harvey got his name, because Harvey was his name. And Dr. Sanders is sort of digging with Elwood, saying, well, what was your father's name? John. What was your best friend's name? I don't know, Ian, I can't remember, but he's desperately trying to sort of associate Harvey the rabbit with Harvey as a person that Elwood has lost in the past, a father, some figure in the family, some old friend who potentially died of in a car crash or died young or something. And he's desperately trying to link these together. And it's like, no,
There's no link.
he's just called Harvey because he is called Harvey. And it was just coincidental that I guessed his name.
What a coincidence that happens to be my name, was what Harvey said, something like that. And it ended up that it was a favorite name of Elwood, Harvey. So
Yeah.
they ended up, they're in that back alley. Wilson comes, he has just run around to a couple other places. Now, we kind of forgot to talk about Dr. Chumley had gone to the bar first and actually wanted to meet Elwood and
Yes.
find out about this rabbit. Apparently had some drinks with Elwood, had some conversations, started to see the rabbit, apparently went off somewhere with the rabbit. Now Wilson realizes that was 4 hours ago. 4 hours ago. Where is he? Oh, I think they either went to this chicken place or this place. And so Wilson is running off. If I don't find him, so help me. So he goes off looking. And then Wilson then in that back alley scene comes in with some police. I've been to those two places and I can't find Dr. Chumley. What did you do with them? And he's got police there ready to grab Elwood and bring him to the sanitarium.
There's also, there's little pieces of information dropped in about Dr. Chumley, because Dr. Chumley tries to chat up a woman on another table who's with another man. And that little piece of information, it sounds like we only briefly meet his wife when obviously she meets Elwood as Elwood's picking flowers in the garden. Elwood's looking for Harvey, of course, and there's a little scene where they're chatting in the car. Now, Elwood invites just about anybody and everybody to go out for a drink or to come around for lunch or something like that. But you kind of get the impression that potentially Dr. Chumley's wife is probably quite oppressive. It's kind of alluded to. But obviously, Dr. Chumley is also kind of quite repressed, I think, because he's looking for a relationship. We have to go forward a little bit in terms of Harvey, in terms of Dr. Chumley's new relationship with Harvey and his desire to just go away for 2 weeks to this particular place with a young woman and just drink beer. And I think create a new relationship with a new woman. It's just a bit slightly kind of weird. But I mean, obviously, you were just about to follow through with the rest of the plot and lead us as to what happened when in the alley, the police turn up to help, assist Wilson take Elwood to the sanatorium where he's going to be locked up. So I'm going to throw it back into your court to explain what happens next.
Yeah, so when they arrive, right before they arrive to the sanatorium, Dr. Chumley has arrived and he is he's let in by the gate guard. He's like, somebody's following me. Quick, close the door. Close the gates. Who's following you? I don't want to say.
For the night, Doctor. I thought you'd gone.
Close them, Hammond. Close them. Close the gates.
Are you all right, Doctor?
I'm being followed.
Who's following you?
None of your business.
So he's rushing in and he's looking back. He feels like somebody's following him. He falls over bushes. He goes in, and as he is going into the sanitarium and closing each door, the door is opening. The door is closing by itself. The door is opening. A door is closing by itself. Now, when I was a kid, I believed that Harvey was real. When I got older and I watched it again, I thought, okay, Harvey's not real. Elwood's a drunk. Watching it again, I'm like, I think Harvey's real. And so he goes in, Dr. Chumley goes into his office, closes it, locks the door, and the door opens. It's Harvey. Harvey's following him. And so then Elwood is brought with all kinds of fanfare, police cars and all that. And there's a big commotion. Chumley jumps out the window to get away from Harvey and makes all the alarms go off. And now Wilson's looking around for somebody. Ultimately, Dr. Chumley decides that he wants to talk to Elwood more about Harvey. And he brings him into the office and he talks to him and he says, when did you meet him? And asks him questions. And then that's when Elwood tells about how, you ever hear the saying, your face could stop a clock? Well, Harvey can actually do that. He can just look at a clock and stop it. And you can go wherever you want for however you want, and no time will pass. And so that's when Dr. Chumley says, will he do it for me? I want to go to Akron. I want to go to Akron for 2 weeks, sit underneath some maple trees with a beautiful woman. And I'm going to tell her my deepest, darkest secrets. And I'm going to have some warm beer or some beer. I'm going to send out for beer. And that's when Harvey says, wouldn't you want some whiskey? And he says, she's going to hold my hand and she's going to say, poor, poor thing. And then Harvey's like, well, wouldn't that get old after 2 weeks? Just like warm beer and poor, poor thing for 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks? Wouldn't that get a little monotonous? Just Akron, cold beer, and poor, poor thing for 2 weeks?
No.
I mean, it's an interesting scene because it turns the patient relationship on its head. Because obviously Dr. Chumley ends up lying on the couch and he's talking to Elwood. It completely throws that around in terms of doctor-patient. Again, beautifully lit, that room. It's just little pools of light, really, really nice. Yeah, I don't know where Acre is or what it is, but there's obviously an American reference. But yeah, this ability to stop time is the one thing which Dr. Chumley wants. He wants the world to stop spinning. He wants his problems to go away. He wants to have a real relationship with somebody. He just wants to drink warm beer. He doesn't want the aggravation of life. Again, it's an interesting one that characters, when they arrive in the cars, the taxi, the police car and all that Elwood is kind of left on his own as the rest of the cast kind of run around trying to sort things out. He's left just picking flowers and, he kind of comes in and he's trying to put a flower in a buttonhole and can't. There's no buttonhole and gives it to Miss Kelly. And again, I mean, one of the things which we haven't touched on is this romantic relationship between Dr. Kelly and Dr. Sanders. Dr. Sanders is completely oblivious to Miss Kelly quite a lot of the time. I mean, it's just when he's been fired from the sanatorium, he said, you know what I'm going to really miss is the lunatics, it's the mad people, it's the psychos. And she's just standing there going, what about me? You're not going to miss me. And again, there's one of those lovely scenes where they move around to get into position and she leans up against a pillar. And she's just kind of got her foot up against the pillar. And it's just, she just can't believe that this Dr. Sanders cannot get the fact that she's in love with him or she's really attracted to him. So, but I mean, I digress and go backwards. We go back to the sanatorium. We go back to the room where Elwood and Dr. Chumley are chatting. And we get to the situation where obviously Dr. Sanders wants to give Elwood this serum 377 or whatever the serum is. Yeah, but there's a taxi driver. There's odd taxi drivers who keep chopping in. I think, okay, I'm going to bounce back to the beginning of the film. The first taxi driver is sitting with Elwood in the back. And I think the taxi driver is called Henry, is introducing Harvey to Henry, Henry to Harvey. It's a real play on words. And the taxi driver pulls out this rather large spanner, this sort of adjustable wrench. This is kind of is a physical tool in case Elwood becomes violent. And there's obviously other taxi drivers who keep dropping into the plot. They're not given much, but they really do kind of create this journey backwards and forwards between the outside world and the world of the sanatorium. But the last taxi driver is the person who pulls things together and says, well, all of these mad people who I bring here, they're lovely in the cab. They're really sweet. They're just so friendly and they're just, the loveliest people on earth. Then they're given this serum. He said they just turn into ordinary, horrible people afterwards. And Veta is just like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this lovely, lovely brother I have. Who's mad? Who sees this rather large white rabbit, but actually is the loveliest person on earth. He doesn't see bad in anybody. He sees the best in everybody. He's just the friendliest person. He's always giving out his business card, or he's giving out a card to everybody, to anybody. The postman at the beginning of the film, the policeman, whoever. And he's saying, don't ring this number because this, don't ring this number because it doesn't work anymore. Always ring me on this number. Always inviting people round to the bar for a beer or home for a meal. I mean, going back to something you said before, there's another lovely scene when he walks into the bar and he's sitting down Harvey in a seat. And there's a man at the end of the bar who's kind of like, what's going on here? And anyway, the barman asks what he wants, and he says, 2 martinis, and he's chatting to Harvey. And the barman says, oh, somebody's returned back to the bar. I can't remember the name of the protagonist. It's just kind of this old man with this great face. Elwood goes across and says, oh, how are you doing? Where have you been? And this old man says, I've been away for 90 days making number plates.
You've been away?
For 90 days.
Oh.
Been doing a job for the state.
I've been in prison. And he said, something about, the last time it was 6 months helping on road construction.
And then
But the shot it's just, again, it's a 2 shot where they're just at the table and the stranger in the bar is in the background, just kind of like trying to listen to what's going on and really trying to get an idea as to, this conversation between these 2 people. Again, just beautifully shot. There's no cutaway of him looking that I remember. He's just in the background and you can see him just kind of getting closer and watching. Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to come back not so much to the plot, but just the visuals of how they create tension, how they create these visuals with basically almost single one shots, by allowing the actors to fill the frame, by allowing the actors to come into frame, by allowing the actors to use the frame and use the movement of the camera to deliver their dialogue perfectly on time in the correct position. It's not so much the plot, which is beautiful. It's not so much the dialogue. For me, it's just how the camera worked in 1950. This is a 1950s film. How they utilized camera action, and some beautifully precise acting in terms of being in the right place at the right time to deliver their lines to another actor. And it's just beautifully done. Just absolutely beautifully done. So I'm going to throw it back to you in terms of the rest of the plot.
Yeah, and so like going back to that last taxi driver, he had come in and wanted to be paid, and he talked about all the people that he drove, how wonderful they were, and how when they got the serum, they weren't so wonderful. He asked to be paid. Well, both the judge is there again, and Vita's there. They don't have money for some reason. Vita checks her whole bag. She doesn't have money. So she knocks on the door, and her brother has yet to get that serum. Like the doctor's getting ready, but he hasn't got it yet. So she gets the money from the brother. She comes out and pays the cab driver, and she says, "Yep, my brother's getting the serum." And that's when he's like, "Oh, I don't really want to. I'm not looking forward to giving him a ride back. He's just going to be."
After this, he'll be a perfectly normal human being. And you know what stinkers they are.
After she stops her brother from getting that serum, she looks in her bag, and there's her coin purse. And she's like, Harvey, because she knows Harvey's the one that hid that coin purse. So she would have to go in and stop her brother from getting the serum.
At that particular point, the film sort of comes to a lovely conclusion where they all kind of leave, and they're walking down some beautiful sort of country path. And he's leading Harvey. He's always leading Harvey. Harvey's being moved around. There's a lovely bit where he's going to Charlie's, the pub, for the bar for a beer, and they're crossing the road, and the fire engine comes, and he has to kind of help Harvey out of the road quite quickly. But coming back to Harvey being this pooker, Wilson is talking to the wife of Mr. Chumley, and she goes, "What's a pooker?" So they open a dictionary, which just happens to be there, and thumb through some pages. And Wilson starts to read out what a puka is. And at the end, the last line is something with reference to Mr. Wilson.
How are
and
you?
he's kind of looking, and he's kind of, yeah, and he flips the book out. So obviously,
How are you, Mr. Wilson? Who in the encyclopedia wants to know?
the puka is this kind of Celtic or Celtic, depending on your pronunciation, mythical character who's a little mischievous. And that's the mischievous side of Harvey coming out. And you do see this occasionally dropped into the film where Harvey is being mischievous with people, with situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a thing that you see that with him taking the change first. You see with him somehow changing the dictionary to say, how are you, Mr. Wilson? And he's like, who in the encyclopedia wants to know? And he's shaking the book. And so that's like the clue that I'm like, okay, Harvey is real. Harvey is real. So
I think, yeah. I think Harvey's definitely very real. I'm going to go with Harvey. I think he's a brilliant character. I mean, coming to the end of this, I have to choose another film, don't I?
yes, you do. And what will it be?
So, Rochelle, the next film, because I'm a cheapskate, I'm a complete cheapskate, and this is a box set of 4 films, Jimmy Stewart films, I'm going to choose Rear Window. And it is a definitely chalk and cheese in relation to Harvey. It's a Hitchcock film. So, yeah, I'm being a cheapskate.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to get a copy.
Yeah, buy the box set. This was like, what would be pennies different for four films and not one. So, yeah, Rear Window.